Hello everyone, and welcome to another program from the Carnegie Historical Museum here in Fairfield. Again, we have the program here at the museum, but FPAC is filming it for viewership for everybody in Fairfield, and we do appreciate Richard Thompson doing that for us today. Today we have a program on Valentines. Valentines is next Thursday, I guess, so we don't want to forget anybody special sending a Valentine, do we? Some of the postcards are mine, and some of the others are Dot's, and then we have some others that people brought today. Mary Ellen Hall brought some. We have some from Chris Small. We've mixed them all together somewhat, so I hope when we're all finished we can sort them out and know whose is whose. Dot is going to talk a little bit about the history of Valentine's Day and illustrate with some of the postcards, and then we'll, some of the different Valentine cards, and then we'll get into specifics. So, Dot, you're on.
Thank you, Gene. Now, at the turn of the century, lovely ladies look forward to receiving dainty, lacy Valentines bearing messages of tender, loving sentiments. When the mail arrived on February the 14th, hearts would flutter. Quickly, the embossed envelope would be opened to reveal its delicate, ornate card inscribed with a romantic verse, but no signature. The mind raced, hope soared. Surely a loved one had sent the card, but who? There was nary a clue, except for the twinkling eye and the fleeting smile of someone close and dear. With the charming mystery all but solved, the Valentines were tucked away to be treasured through the years. Now many of these keepsakes are coming to light, again having been found in memory books and antique trunks. The custom of giving Valentines has a long history. Tradition maintains that Valentine's Day started in the 3rd century when Romans celebrated a spring festival called Lupercalia. Emperor Claudius II placed a ban on marriages because he wanted young men to remain single for military service, but a Christian bishop named Valentine defied the emperor by marrying young lovers. He was thrown in prison, where he befriended and cured the blind daughter of the jailer. On the eve of February the 14th, 207, Valentine sent his young friend a farewell message signed, "Your Valentine." A few hours later, he was executed. During the earliest years of the tradition of sending Valentines, the giver carefully composed a message and prepared the Valentine by hand. Hours were spent laboring over the delicate details of a cut paper note or sentimental folk art illustrations. Eventually, lacy papers used as ornamental backgrounds for Valentines were produced. These were often decorated by designers to aid the passionate but the uncreative. By the 1900s, Valentines were sent to many friends and relatives, not just to that special person. Because most had limited budgets, cards became inexpensive, simple prints, and were mass-produced. Valentines still were available in a variety of sizes, qualities, and price ranges. The earliest Valentines created by hand to express the sender's desire was the cut work. Cut work is one of the oldest forms of handmade Valentines. Intricate designs were painstakingly cut from a single sheet of paper and then decorated with verse and color. I have an example of that type of Valentine. They would take a piece of paper and draw a very intricate design on it. Could be birds, flowers, and hearts. And then after they'd take the scissors and cut all these little pieces out, then they would write a message on there, and then they would put it on another color of paper so that the cut work would show. Another form is done in watercolors and hand lettering by Pennsylvania Germans was called a fracter. Now this is a type of folk art where they took paint and they drew little designs of people or birds or animals, and then with either the old German type of script or calligraphy, they wrote a beautiful message on the Valentine. And of course you can see, since these were all made by hand, they certainly became keepsakes for the people that received them. Handmade Valentines were also made in the form of games or riddles. One kind, an endless knot of love, had to be turned repeatedly in a circle to be read. Its message was written in a seemingly endless geometric design. And this is the type of a love knot. So you had to start over here, and it says, "Sweetest of creatures, to thee I send the knot of love, which has no end, to let you know my love is true, and that to none alive but you. So be my wife, and live with me, as long as life shall granted be, and I shall ever faithful prove to thee, alone my only love." A puzzle purse was a paper folder's delight. As the recipient unfolded the purse, part of the verse was exposed. I think many of you remember doing this when you were in school. And as you opened each one of these, there was a message. It says, "Be mine, kisses, I love you, hugs." And then in here it says, "Please be my Valentine." An acrostic Valentine used each letter in a person's name to begin each line. So this one happened to be made for Mary. And her name was printed down the side, and then you made up a line to go with each letter in her name. "May I be your Valentine, and keep your heart close to mine. Remember how I yearn for thee. You're the one I want for me." Another Valentine was made using a rebus. A verse in which tiny pictures take the place of some of the words is a rebus. So this would be a form of a rebus. And this one says, "Dearest one, for you I pine. Will you be my Valentine?" Now later we have a couple here that are on the form of a rebus, but instead of just using the symbol, they printed the word also. So this one says, "I hope this'll," a thistle, "I hope this'll show you I want you for my Valentine." And then this is an inkwell, and it says, "Give me an inkling. May I put you down as my Valentine." Lithograph Valentines, introduced in the 19th century by firms Turner and Fisher of Philadelphia and D.W. Moody of New York, hastened the commercialization of Valentines. Esther Holland formed a production line in her home in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1848. She is credited with the first raised Valentines, the first painting on silk, the first lace patterns in America, and the first glazed paper under lace. Another American maker of Valentines was George Whitney. One component of his success was that he marketed Valentines for all ages. This is one of his light-hearted verses. "If you will be my Valentine, I'll meet your dearest wishes. I'll sweep the flat and feed the cat and help you wipe the dishes." Now, Mr. Whitney's Valentines are very, you can always see his kind. He has a very stylized way of doing hearts and flowers, and every time you see a Whitney Valentine, you'll know it immediately. And each one has a little verse inside. This one says, "Greetings to my Valentine, I have come to call, to ask if I can call you mine. I like you best of all." Now this is a reproduction of a Whitney. They're being made now, and you can see they're picking up the same type of flowers and hearts and things to put on these Valentines. Now this type of Valentine is what we call a movable Valentine. And so that means that part of it moves. They can also be, this little girl is in here and she's moving back and forth within that heart. I had one here that I wanted to show. Oh. This is an interesting one. It says, well, I should snicker. You're slated for my nifty Valentine. And I don't really know why it has a long neck on it, because the message doesn't say anything about a neck. But that's the type it is. And these are cute little Valentines. They have a little animal in the teacup, and when you push him down, the little heart pops up and it says, I love you. In the mid-1800s, penny cards came into vogue. These comic valentines, with insulting verses, cost 1 cent each and were usually sent unsigned. Here is an example of penny card humor. Sue, you're a gal with a heart of ice. Who would want you? You've got lice. Because the recipient had to pay postage, penny cards, also called penny dreadfuls, generated many complaints at the post office. By the turn of the century in England, the sending of elaborate valentines had declined, and by World War I had almost disappeared. Only postcard valentines were enjoying popularity, particularly in the United States. The heyday for postcards was from 1907 to 1914. And now Gene is going to tell you a little bit about his postcard collection.
Okay, Dot, you need to talk about a few more here before you're done too, but we'll get those later. Actually, postcards in the United States date back to around 1898 or so, and that's when the United States government declared that postcards could be sent for a penny. It wasn't until after the turn of the century, though, the postcards really came into popularity, because the early ones were primarily postcards that were from tourist sites and things like that, more of a souvenir type cards. So in around 1906 is when I tend to think the beginnings of postcards came into existence as we see them here today. Most of the postcards I have here are 1906, and some of them go up into the 1920s to 1930s, but 1906 up until World War I was really the heyday. The early postcards were primarily made in Germany, and after World War I broke out, then that pretty much made the United States producers start manufacturing postcards for use in the United States. But the early ones primarily were printed in Germany. There's a lot of different kinds of postal cards that were sent. Many of them are embossed. They have shiny surfaces. They have a texture that's pleasant to feel. It's fun to get your fingers on them. The early ones, some of the early ones are undivided backs, and those would date the postcards before 1907. And before 1907, the only message that could be written on a postcard would have to have been on the front of the postcard. So in 1907, the government allowed people to have a divided back postcard where they get address on one side and write a message on the other side. Surprisingly, and I was talking to Mary Ellen about this earlier, is that a lot of postcards were never really even sent. A lot of them were just signed, given to somebody with a message on them, and treated more like a postcard that we saw earlier from Dot. Many of them were sent, some of them were sent, but the ones that I have here today, I would bet not a fourth have postmarks on them to date them. And I always like postmarks because it helps me tell the year that they were sent, and I enjoy reading the old messages that people wrote along with them. A couple of the postcards that I like real well, see here. This is probably one of my favorite postcards that I brought, and it's an envelope, and simply on the outside it just says, "To my Valentine." It is a postal card. It's not been used on the back, and as we unfold the envelope, then the scene pops out in front, and I just think that shows the quality of work that could be done, and these die cuts I think are just exceptional as far as the workmanship and just a very interesting postcard. Another one that was die cut is a little postcard like this, and then it's meant to fold down and then have a scene in front too. And not all tied up tight, but these are really the fancier varieties of the postcards. And I just have a hard time today figuring out how some of these postcards ever made it through the mail in the condition that they were delivered. Some of the others that are most desirable ones are postcards that have various, sometimes pieces of fabric, pieces of foil, or other little techniques. This is almost like a saran wrap, but it's hard, but it's over an image of Cupid in the background. And again, meant to be sent. This one was never used, evidently. It has a lot of different qualities. It has an embossing of the trees. It has the foil. So probably collecting-wise, this is probably a desirable postcard. I really have not gotten into the value of postcards. I just enjoy them for what they are, and we always display some. Every holiday we have a little hanger, a little stand like this that we put some postcards out. The purists will say that you shouldn't do this with your postcards because it can scratch them. But I still enjoy, I like having them out. I just can't have them all in books or whatever. A couple of those that are kind of interesting that I picked out was the one that has just swans on it. It's just simply Be My Valentine, but the swans all have a little, are holding the hearts, and I think that's a real unusual postcard, just different than what we see as the general things. A lot of the ones that we see have pictures of ladies on. This is an interesting set, I think, of cards. Sometimes the messages really didn't have too much of a hard theme, but they said, To My Valentine is the general. Some of the ones got into having individual messages. Let's see if I can read some of these, and this happens to be a 1910 one. I can't express the thoughts this heart of mine would pen, but you will understand them. I'm sure you will, so then I'll just say hello. And that's not a Cupid, but a pen going through the heart. It's kind of an unusual little piece of artwork. We'll have these out to look at later. A lot of these that have the embossing on them I think are very nice. Again, most of these were printed in Germany and date from the 1906 to 1910 or 12 era, although postcards obviously were in existence later. Some of the ones like these date into the 1920s and 1930s. Dot, you want to talk a little bit about these that Mary Ellen brought? You know a little bit more about some of those that I do. These will be out to look at. I did bring some Valentines over here for a little more my era. These were not my cards, but these probably date from the 50s or 60s, something like that. And they're really interesting to see those. But Dot, why don't you go ahead and talk about those cards, and then we'll visit a little more about these.
Okay. Around 1925, the custom of giving Valentines was revived, and relatively inexpensive sums were labeled Made in USA. So most of the cards that you will find do not have the maker's name on them. They just simply say Made in USA. Now when Mrs. Holland, or Miss Holland, made hers in Massachusetts, she put a little blue H up in the corner, but I have never found any that have that little H on them. It must be very difficult to find. Now some Valentines were decorated with colored tissue paper. Known as mesh paper, many layers of colored tissue paper are glued together at different points so that it looks like an accordion when it's opened. They are sometimes called honeycomb Valentines because they look as if the bees themselves were in on the manufacturing. They would cut these honeycombs into various shapes so that they could use them on these Valentines, and they were first issued in 1903. Now some of these employ just about everything. They are a fold down, they have a honeycomb on them, and they have the lithograph, and so they incorporate all three different styles in one. Now these are very old, these here, and this one that Jean has. And so when you look at them, there was really a lot of work and a lot of detail on that card with all those little cupids and the envelopes and the hearts. And they're very lovely to look at and very easy to fold and keep because they all folded flat. I think it's amazing how the simple way that they thought to open them. They just put a little strip of paper across the back, a little bit of cardboard, and that held it open. Now the newer ones that are being made are made with these clips. So you can put, and this is a reproduction of an old one. Now, during World War II, patriotic themes were popular subjects for Valentines. And we have a couple here. We have this little soldier with an American flag and a little heart. It's a little Valentine. It says, "My heart is red, your eyes are blue, my love for you is sweet and true." And it says, "Be my Valentine." And this happens to be a postcard from World War I. And it has a song on it, "When the war is over, mother dear." And down the bottom here it said, it's printed by permission from this music company that wrote the song, but it says, "When the war is over, mother dear, when the bands all play and people cheer, as the boys come marching through the dear hometown, joy bells ringing gaily as the sun goes down, though your heart is achy, mother dear, for your soldier boy, never fear, I'll come back someday and kiss your tears away when the war is over, mother dear." Now, by the 1930s, these mechanical valentines that I talked about became popular, and this is one that this is all about. When you move his arms, his eyes go back and forth. So this is a fun one. Then they featured comic characters such as Maggie and Jiggs, and she brought a jig, which is really nice. Yeah, this belongs to Mrs. Hall.
She also has one here, Rip Van Winkle, is that who that is?
Oh, that's one of the seven dwarfs.
Yeah, seven dwarfs. It looks like Rip to me. Hey, I'm not a
Where have
dwarf.
you been?
I don't know. But it's the seven dwarfs, and,
That was
as you,
before your time.
that one hand goes up and the other goes down as it's moved.
That's a mechanical one,
Yes.
too. And so they featured such characters as Maggie and Jiggs, Andy Gump, Blondie and Dagwood, Felix the Cat, and finally Disney characters like this one here. After World War II, superheroes stole the hearts of the American public. Characters such as Superman, Captain Marvel, Batman, and Wonder Woman became popular. Now in the mid-70s, the Peanuts gang, Ziggy, and Garfield were popular. And these are some modern Valentines. Now as you go on into the 50s, this is from Cabbage. This is a Cabbage Patch card. That was very popular at one time. Then we have our sports figures. This is Michael Jordan, and they were very popular. Here are the, what do they call it? I forgot.
I'm not going to say.
The Ninja Turtles. And some Disney characters, just little cards that the children can stick in an envelope. And here's Garfield. So those are the more modern cards that came out in the late, this one, I dated those so I would know. This one was a 98. Although there are still many sentimental Valentines for sale, here are some verses from the 90s. Now years ago when you made your own Valentine, you could buy a book that had Valentine verses in it. So you didn't have to compose your own. You could take one of these little verses and write it on your card. So now here are some of the Valentine verses for the 90s, which is a little bit past us now. "I used to get breathless just thinking of you. Now I get breathless just tying my shoe. Happy Valentine's Day from your out-of-shape girlfriend." "You forgot another Valentine's Day, but dear, don't take it hard. I bought myself some roses and used your MasterCard." And this is one. "You can call me dearest, you can call me sweet, but if you call me Sally one more time, your things are on the street." Whether the sentiments expressed in these old Valentines were affection for a dear friend, fun poked at an acquaintance, or serious intent cloaked in wistful verse, their very existence preserves a romantic tradition precious to people generations ago. Now we have just a few special ones here. These Valentines incorporate the flowers and then this very lovely type of lace, paper lace. This is another one made in that same era. Now if you study Valentines and you have a number of Valentines, as you look at them you'll realize that those are in the same year because they look so much alike. As the years go on, they change, and they look a lot. We were just comparing one of Mrs. Hall's postcards is exactly the same type of postcard that Gene has in his collection. Now, these have really lovely verses in them. You know, they were very sentimental in the old days. Take a gift, a flower for me, sweetest Valentine. Simply shall its message be, my heart is thine. Now this one, did you pick up?
I was just going to read this one inside. It's a picture of kind of a castle inside, and I've not read it before. So, a peerless gem there is on earth, of richest reward, purest worth. 'Tis priceless, and 'tis worn by few. It is the heart that's true.
Oh, this kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the cards that I found in with mine. I think it's Raggedy Ann. It sure looks like Raggedy Ann. And it folds up together, and the verse is inside of it. But it sits up. It's meant to stand.
Now some that you don't see today very much are the ones that are black. And they're very hard to find today. I suppose most of them just got thrown away. But this one says, I want's a Valentine. Ain't you ever one to warm up to me? Black Valentine. And this one,
Like a gold dust.
use my honey. There may be others buzzing round, but I think you all is mighty sweet. And that's cut so that little bee flies up there, that little butterfly, and the bees are buzzing around. And then besides giving Valentines, you know, things got so that began giving presents. Another gift was maybe a nice handkerchief, could be enclosed in a card for Valentine's Day. And then also a little sachet where people made a heart and put some sachet inside and gave them to you to put in your drawer with your clothes. So, you're welcome to come up and look at these. There's a lot of different kinds. This is a little one from Germany. Cute little guy. And these are a couple German postcards, but you can see they're so much alike that they probably came from the same series. And these are all reproductions. And they say on the back, they say that they're reproductions so that you don't mix them up. Now this is a scrapbook belonging to Chris Small, and you're welcome to come up and look through it.
Well, I think as you look through this and have been listening, there's just a variety of different ways Valentine's greetings were wished through the years. It's from the very intricate to the very simple, the ornate, all kinds of styles. So we do thank those that have brought Valentines to share with us today, and feel free to look these over. Our next program at the museum will be the second Sunday in March, and we're planning to have a program on Parsons College athletics, where we have some people that are coming who played at Parsons College over the years to talk about their experiences, and we'll be taking some things out of our archives in the museum to share some Parsons sports memorabilia. So that should be an interesting program next month. But as for today, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for watching on FPAC, and we hope you enjoyed another program from the Carnegie Historical Museum. Dot, thank you very much.